Hello, and welcome back to the third episode of INaction's How to Fix the World in 80 Days. Contrary to number 2, number 3 is something we can all agree on, increasing our right to free speech. While I would be the first to acknowledge that our right to free speech has been getting increasingly better in most parts of the world, we aren't even anywhere close to being where we need to be. In this case, the problem starts at the very top, namely the government and the ridiculous laws that they create. Governments love to control freedom of speech for their own benefit. For example, in Thailand, it's illegal to criticize the monarchy, and people actually go to jail for doing so. In Turkmenistan, the government controls not just all the news sources, but internet access as well. And in North Korea, 100% of the population voted for Kim Jong-un, because he was the only name on the ballot. Now, while all of these countries have freedom of speech legislation, governments often put themselves above the law.
Well, when the president does it, that means that it is not illegal.
How ironic. I could go on with the hilariously tragic examples, but once again, my 5 minutes of your attention span are quickly coming to an end. And besides, governments aren't the only ones who are guilty of abusing freedom of speech. Civil societies, businesses, and above all, individuals are guilty of doing exactly the same thing. We live in this ridiculous world where 140-character Twitter logic is counted as policy, and everything needs to be so PC principle that you can't have a serious discussion without being accused of being some kind of racist or sexist or some kind of ist. And therein lies the honest reality of free speech. As your right to free speech grows, so it does for everybody else. So to truly believe in free speech, you need to be equally willing to listen to what other people have to say. And for every Martin Luther King or Jon Stewart, there's a Richard Nixon, Sarah Palin, or Kardashian XYZ. Unfortunately, most people are only willing to protect freedom of speech when it's convenient for them. So while freedom of speech is a cornerstone of any strong society, what good is all the talking if no one's willing to listen? Probably the easiest way to protect freedom of speech is to respect the laws as they're already written. It's no coincidence that the countries who tend to rank the highest in transparency also statistically have the best quality of life. Really shouldn't be that much of a surprise. I also feel like we need stronger protection for whistleblowers who are exposing illegal behavior. While many countries do have progressive legislation, there remains a very negative stigma associated behind a lot of what they do. The system is broken if the only way to blow the lid is to go through your superiors who have a vested interest in keeping those secrets secret. Instead, whistleblowers should go through an independent consortium of journalists like they did with the Panama Papers and like they did with the first WikiLeaks dumps. We need to find ways to make whistleblowing more transparent. On a similar note, journalists need better access to facts. Too often, they are barred altogether due to national security issues. But what could be a bigger threat than an uninformed population? For example, you can't just try to shut down Al Jazeera because you don't like what they have to say. Maybe you should stop giving them reasons to write nasty stuff about you. Another thing we need to do is to get rid of all these legal gray areas. In my opinion, it shouldn't be illegal to talk about something unless you actually follow through with your actions. So to use a very graphic example, in Germany, it's illegal to do the Nazi salute or to deny the Holocaust. Obviously, both of these actions are awful, but where do we draw the line? More importantly, who gets to draw that line? Two of my biggest artistic heroes, the creators of South Park, said that there's no issue they would deem too controversial to joke about because as soon as someone says something's not okay to talk about, then anyone can use that same victim card and all of a sudden you can't talk about anything. So either everything is okay to talk about or nothing should be. And lastly, just listen. No matter how much you might disagree with what the person has to say. Even if I'm listening to a neo-Nazi or an eco-terrorist, I'm only doing myself and the world a disservice by not at least trying to understand their point of view. Freedom of speech is not black and white. It's not about perfection, it's about progress. So if you want to be willing to talk, then you better be willing to listen.